Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. Welcome to Dreamy Dreamland with Sensei Al Bob. I am your griot, Sensei Al Bob. And don't believe a word I say. This show is strictly for entertainment's sake, and children should not be watching. Because we are asking for you to suspend your disbelief. Children don't have disbelief. They are innocent. Hey, Eden. I dreamt of an abandoned coal mine. What was going on in the coal mine? Well, last night I asked everyone, because we had quite an interesting chat. And these shows are shamanic ceremonies, right? I meditate, I energize. And in the chat, it's not so much what people write, it's the energy they write it with, right? And what is happening, right? This is the illuminated side, the incandescent side, this is the dark side. And that is everyone. We all have these two sides to us, and they're neither bad nor good, they just are. It's how your intent pursues the understanding of the duality, right? We're put in this universe of duality, and it's not like our planet, Earth, is separate. It's not like Terrians are separate. We are part of the universe. And so, being part of the universe, we experience everything the rest of the universe does. Let's see. Eden says, a nuclear war. Yes, we are on the precipice because there was 26,000 years ago an Epicurean group of folk, of philosophers and tellers and seers, and they saw a thing called a black swan. And they said the human race was here to learn things, and unless you learn them, you repeat. History is like a bad meal, undigested. It keeps repeating, repeating, and it that circle of events takes about 4 generations, 90 years. And what happens is something really bad occurs, and that generation who goes through it learns from that lesson, sets up protocols, and tries to keep that from happening again. But as the generations go by and things don't look so dark, we go through the same thing, and they called it a black swan, right? So before the Great Depression, we had the Spanish flu pandemic, and they only call it Spanish flu. It's not that it started in Spain. It was that World War I was going on, and Spain was a neutral country, so they were not restricted by the propaganda and the fake news of the time. And so they were saying, hey, we're seeing this. Oh, look what's happening in Spain. And they were giving out, relevant and important statistical, factual news about what this was. And the United States, England, Germany, France, they did not call it, a pandemic. Even though 50 million people died in 1918, just 1918. And the death toll of that pandemic kept going on all the way into the 1920s. But the Federal Reserve pumped free money into the stock market, and it went through the roof, and everybody and his brother was buying stock on call, meaning they didn't have to put any money down to buy the stock, but they could get the benefits on the backside. And that was you're supposed to take that profit and pay off your call for your stock. But the call didn't come due until the credit crunch collapsed, right? The bubble popped. Now, we've had so many bubbles in the last 20, 40 years that we should have been well, right, understanding what was going on. We've had so many pandemics. We've had so many different flus. The avian flu, the swine flu, the N whatever flu. We had SARS and MER and Ebola, and the other thing that's occurring that's is the antibiotic resistant diseases, and that's becoming a real problem to the point that all the things that go on in hospitals won't be able to go on in hospitals. I mean, you won't be able to get your chemotherapy because you have to take these drugs that knock your immune system down. And if you have viruses, not bacterias that don't respond to antibiotics, if you take a thing that knocks your immune system down, right? And there are sexual transmitted diseases now, that just don't respond to antibiotics. So that is the nuclear war that we're experiencing right now. And hundreds of millions of people are dying, right? And our present, the novel 19, there is so many crossover. There is no truth about it. There is no, no one listens to anything. And the scientists themselves have hidden agendas. The guy who is in charge of the WHO, go study who he is. He's not a nice man. Mr. Fauci and Scarf Lady, they have real serious connections to Big Pharma who want everyone to take the injection, and there's a lot of scientific evidence saying that viruses can't get inside of you unless they're injected, right? So there's so much, and like I said, don't believe anything I say. I don't know anything, right? But we are already in a nuclear war. We're already in that cave that Eden's talking about. So let's put on the other set of glasses so I can actually read. And Eden, if you could, you always have something clear and salient to say. So if you could put it in all caps, I know that it's not the protocol, but then I could read it. Let's see. The dreaming was so intense. My teeth were twisted. Oh, yes, I hate it when that happens. So I dreamt about a similar thing, but it was about starting off with the Spanish-American War, and that the nuclear war has been going on since then. Could feel the pain. Nukes were going off all over the world, and it was all unexpected. Yes, nuclear war will be unexpected, just like that. And you won't really know who really started it because we live in a totally transnational world. We don't have nation states anymore. Russia, China, United States, they're not enemies. They're competing corporate, because all of these are corporate states, The United States is a corporate state. You drive around the country, then you go through a little town that says, welcome to the incorporated city, the incorporated village, the incorporated county, incorporated state. In 2008, when the collapse happened, I was taking care of my parents, and my parents lost about a quarter of their net worth in a month. I'm a millionaire. Well, he lost basically all his stock and his real estate. He could have sold all his real estate for millions of dollars, but after that, it was worth pennies on the dollar. So we're in this nuclear war, and it's ramping up every day, even though Carrot Head goes, his daily little briefings, which aren't briefings, they're just tirades to go after people, right? Again, this is the nuclear war, the duality of our soul, right? We're learning, and if it, the universe will give us whatever we need. If we need a nuclear war to learn how to be empathetic, well, maybe we'll get that. And see how bright this is? This is kind of the flash of the nuclear bomb, This is coming from the sun, which is a big hydrogen bomb. It's also a time machine. But before I said that we would all somehow meet up into the dream world anyway, definitely got a sense that I was in Virginia, but ended up at an abandoned coal mine. Well, there are a bunch of abandoned coal mines in Virginia, that's for sure. And in West Virginia and Kentucky and, that whole Appalachian strain, all the way from, Pennsylvania to Georgia. And there are a lot of underground, there are a lot of DUMBs, deep underground military bases that, were first um, brought on by renovating mines, salt mines and caves. And then they got the technology to dig it out. And so there are a lot of, there's enough space for a million or two or three underground just in the United States. And along the Blue Ridge Mountains, there's tons of facilities. So I was wondering what the connection was with you and the abandoned industrial facilities. Um, I've never felt so helpless and scared in a dream. My trick for really intense dreams is to drink a cup of strong coffee before bed. Yep. Well, let's see. I also remembered the dream that I was being watched and chased by the military. Well, again, we live in the military, when Eisenhower said, watch out for the military industrial complex. He wasn't kidding around. Walmart's is part of it, you know, IHOP is part of it, and, the large corporate structure is the military industrial complex. And look at this, $1 trillion bailout. And all it is they're emptying out the coffers before the deed occurs, right? So that's why I'm out here in the middle of nowhere. I'm definitely socially, spacing myself, and that's why I'm doing these live chats to try and get the community awake. And Eden is always very, if you have a smartphone, you're being watched. So I get all these Google things. Oh, you're such a great guy, and look at this app we let you have, and oh, we're giving you, Google World, and look at all the places you've been, and they just tick off all the places my little cell phone and I have been. And if that ain't, telling me, hey, we're watching you, I don't know what is. But all of that is irrelevant because of this duality, because of this illusion of the material. The only thing that matters is love's co-creation. When you have that in your heart, and a good way to do is, going into state. And one of the best easy ways of going into state is breathing deeply. 20% in more than your autonomic system and 30% out. And by breathing that in, you're breathing in the prana of Father Sky, right? And when you're breathing out, you're emptying, you're evacuating all the negative energy out of your body, and you are grounding that prana flow with Mother Earth through your chi. And one of the easiest ways of precipitating this flow is through prayer. And one of the best prayers is the Our Father and the Hail Mary. They are not just, Roman Catholic prayers. They go way back to the Epicureans, right? They understood the dynamic of Father Earth and Father Sky and Mother Earth. And so, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. That was in the beginning, is now, ever shall be, world without amen. And in every day and every way, let us take the peace of the earth and make it stronger through love's co-creation. And Father, hear our prayer. Bless us indeed. Enlarge our territory. Put your hand upon our shoulder and keep us from evil, so we will do no harm. Right? That's all we have to do is stay away from evil. Keep a sharp. Don't let things get in your grill. Keep a sharp eye. 3 blocks, 360, and if something funky's coming, get out of the way. Just don't be there. Right? I have 3 rules of getting involved. One, doctor, do no harm. I don't do anything with a state of, my authority. If I do no harm. I do not travel with evil. I do not harm, period. Right? Now, I learned, I studied martial arts, and I learned how to, protect myself and I studied with a great master in Putney, Vermont, who was a Shinto priest, and to teach us healing. He basically taught us to be a Shinto priest. We went through that whole monastery aesthetic, right? And we built a monastery, which is, you should be building your own monastery now, gang. And if it's, a lot of people build little altars in their house, to keep them, their intent aware of where they should be thinking, not, you look at the media, it is wall to wall fear porn, it's just unbelievable, right? They're trying to cue people up for, the black swan, and they're emptying out the coffers, they're giving trillions to the corporate state, and no one's going to have a job, but the rich guys, the transfer of wealth has been astronomical. And it hasn't been this astronomical since the Great Depression, The Great Depression at the height, 1929, when the stock market was at its zenith, right? And all, there's, half the people who were in the stock market were, working class people who had bought stock on margin. And the only people who knew what was going on was the rich. And so at the very tippy top, the value of that stock was 100% more than what was the product value of those businesses, right? 100% more. Reflected in the value of the stock, not of what was being produced, the GDP, the gross domestic product, what was being manufactured. The stock price was 100% above that, right? Well, it hadn't been that high and since, last January, early January, when we were almost at 30,000. We were 29,800 and something, right? And at that point, we were almost 155% more value of the stock to the GDP, right? And then, starting in February and March, we lost almost, 20%, like that in 2 weeks, right? And then we started having these bailouts of trillions of dollars. And that stopped the precipitous fall, but it hasn't gone back up. It's gone up by 400 or 500 points and then down 1,000 and up, 1,900 and down, and so we're still, a good almost 20% from where we were at the very top. And it's reflecting, so we have, gone into this draconian thing of locking everyone down, right, to flatten the curve. But if this virus is, as Mr. Critical Thinking, this is guy Cliff Hayes, or Cliff H, whatever his last name, but it's Critical Thinking, this is YouTube site, and he's a computer programmer that makes models, and he worked for DARPA, and he modeled nuclear war, chemical war, and biological war. And he says what's going on is basically, a biological weapon, a virus that's been weaponized. And he shows who did it, where it happened, and that it's, China. It was released in China by a Chinese lab, either through incompetence or on purpose for political reasons in China. But the incompetence and poor response by the Xi Jinping, they tried to ignore it, just like Carrot Head did. And then it took off, and they have a population of 1 billion plus. And they, their one child thing has already devastated their economy because they got no workers left, just old people. And so this was one good way to sweep a lot of the old people into the dustbin. And, but nothing, so they went through this draconian thing to flatten the curve. But, so now they're letting people out. And so China is like, hey, look what they're doing, to learn, not to copy what they're doing, because, they ignored it for the first 2.5 months, where they could have, if they had in that little one province just locked that down, it would have stopped this by just like they did with SARS. But they didn't. They ignored it, right? And then they let the horse out of the door around the time of the Chinese New Year, where everybody goes traveling, goes back home, and it got spread all over the place, right? And the rich people went off to Europe, and the Europeans got it, and the Europeans came to America. And Donnie's, xenophobia, China, he closed the door, but not soon enough. And he didn't close the door on the Europeans, still hasn't, and he didn't put anyone at the airport like, with little, you got to, get into quarantine. He has done none. He's testing. Oh, we've got 2 million people tested. That's less than 1%. This thing has already gotten out the door. New York and the hotspots are just the tip of the iceberg, right? So that's the nuclear war we're facing. And when it gets really bad, that's when people will unleash the Gorgon, and because they said, well, these people are they're sharpening up the pitchforks and getting the torches ready for us. So we might as well unleash the Gorgon and, give them something really to worry about, right? So, an economic collapse and, pandemic's not bad enough. Well, let's do this, right? So, and there's so many ways, just push India and Pakistan together, get Iran and Saudi Arabia going at each other, have, park a U.S. Nimitz-class aircraft carrier in the Straits of Hormuz because everyone's sick on board and they can't run the ship. And some guys from who knows where comes out in speedboats and takes down, and they probably would use the Kennedy, right? Because it's in, not dry dock, but moored, and it's past its life. And to refit it would cost way more than building 2 new aircraft carriers. And the cost of decommissioning it would be, and doing it, by the book, would cost about the cost of 1 new aircraft carrier. So if you park that in the Straits of Hormuz and let some radical, isn't it interesting we don't hear about radicals anymore, that terrorism isn't really, so we're in an interesting, we're in the black swan is about to sing, right? And the best thing you can do, gang, is to, get into state, see what's really happening. I told the folks to go into dream time and see what was going on. And Eden did, and he saw, nuclear war. And, and dreams are things that need to. Sandra, how you doing? Dreamboat. Sandra, did you have any dreams last night? Did you see anything? Oh, so this is my morning ramble, and I just want to set the cue up for today. I'm wearing towels. I just, got out of the shower, and the sun has come out. It was a cloudy morning when I woke up around 7, but now it's, what is it? Almost 9 a.m. Okay, so I'm going to go have breakfast, and then I'm going to go putter around, and maybe I'll come back in the afternoon and, give you a little more of a point of view and a space to say what's going on. So, I may come back before noon, before I go and play in the woods, especially since, but it's a cold day. This week which might even snow. But that's April in the mountains. We're 4,000 feet up in the air. So it's like when I go into those two cities that are down in valleys, they're about a good 18. Let's see, Boone is about 1,800 feet below where I am, and Johnson City is probably a good 2,000 feet because they're in a real valley, and the edge of the Ohio Valley, and so we're just budding and flowering, and Johnson City's got leaves already. Everything's covered. But spring is a beautiful time. It's a time of rebirth. That's why they have Jesus coming out of his cave. The cave, the cave, boss, the cave. That's what Eden was talking about, being in the coal mine. And and so the man-made things are nothing compared to nature. I mean, a asteroid or a big rock came out. It wasn't in our solar system, wasn't something that we've been keeping an eye on, like up in the Oort belt, but it came out of stage left. And the only reason we noticed it is that we have these radars and telescopes looking at every little piece of space junk that we have put up in space, about 45,000 little bolts and gloves and handbags and whatever, even a Wendy's cheeseburger wrapper going at 18,000 miles an hour to hit a satellite or the International Space Station, it would rip it apart. So the space station gets hit by little chunks of dust all the time, and they have to patch it. They start losing atmosphere, and they have here's the hole. So they have to patch it. So they have a pretty sophisticated warning system around the Earth, looking at all that junk in space. And every so often there's satellites that back in the day we would put up spy satellites that would need a lot of juice, more than solar cells or batteries could do. So they would have these basically nuclear reactors in space. These things about the size of a foot locker that would have really vastly decaying isotopes in them, that when those particles would hit up against certain metals, they would create electricity and heat, and the heat would be turned into other things. So to have massive radar installations looking at navies down below, you needed these things. And U.S. and Russia did a number of those, didn't tell anybody, but every now and then they would come falling back to Earth. And when they did, they would burn up and spread those isotopes all over the air. Now, the rise in cancer was said, back in the 60s and 50s, we were blowing up nuclear weapons willy-nilly, and then we stopped that. Well, the rate of cancer did not drop. It increased exponentially. It had a lot to do with stuff like that. So they have these radars looking at every little bolt in space, and within that field of looking at stuff, they saw this gigantic rock zipping through their field of vision. They didn't, things they normally look at, asteroids and comets and and the Oort belt. It didn't come from there. It came from out of our solar system. It was like a rogue rock, and it just wow, and it went between the Earth and the Moon, which in astronomical numbers is like nothing, right? It's like a centimeter. And it came close enough to disrupt our electromagnetic field, which is another thing that we measure because it's moving all over the place. And it's a sign that we may have a pole shift. And if that were to happen, it's like spinning a top, right? And so if that were to happen, the atmosphere around would be spun like a top at about, 18,000, 20,000 miles an hour. So that would basically, erase everything on the surface of Earth, unless you were down in a coal mine, like Eden was talking about. So, and that's why do you think they have so many of these deep underground military bases, and they're not just hiding, the generals down there. They have space. I worked on one off of Lake Arenda, not Arenda. It was one of the Finger Lakes in upstate New York near Ithaca. It was a Cargill salt mine, and it went from that Finger Lake all the way to Ohio, like 300 miles underground, 900 feet underground. And it was this big seam of salt that they dug out over 100 years. And it was about 200 feet high and about, quarter mile wide. And it went from, upstate New York to Ohio, right? And that was a very weird place. And I didn't want to go, but my boss really needed me to go and tune a transformer, and he paid me ungodly cash to do it, and he's my buddy, so I did it. Anyway, so that's the day we're looking at, right? But I keep saying this is a great opportunity because the universe doesn't do anything unless we need it, and it's pushing the envelope so much, giving us so many warnings saying, yo, wake up, pinheads, realize the only thing that matters is love's co-creation, your empathy to your brother and sister. And look who's, our fearless leader and all the fearless leaders, and again, this is a replay of the swan song of, from the Spanish-American War all the way up to today, because, the Spanish-American War was a land grab of, the Anglo-American economic system, to grab all of that which Spain had. And Spain grabbed it by first sinking the English Navy and, then taking off into the Caribbean and into South America and taking all the gold, right? And all the resources and, making an empire down there. And that's what we took. And they also were into, they kept going east or west, however you look at it, into Asia. All the Philippines, all those islands, the Marianas, all of that stuff up to Japan. They went up to Japan. And the Spanish-American War took all that stuff from Spain. And Japan was just building up to do that, and we stepped in first, just took it all. And that's what brought on the Second World War, because they were basically our allies from the Civil War up until the Second World War. And what happened was, so World War I comes, they build, a modest modern navy, and, who can they go attack but Russia? And they defeated the Russian Navy, which was like the third or fourth largest navy in the world. And Japan, through strategy and modern technology, took out Russia. Now, we should have realized that right off the bat. So World War I comes about through, economic competition. And economic competition, and then it, went into tariffs, and Woodrow Wilson, that guy, he was one of the, nastiest. He makes, Carrot Head look competent and a nice guy. I mean, the first movie ever shown in the White House was Birth of a Nation. And that's where Jim Crow got its teeth, because Woodrow watched it, and he basically legalized the Klan and the different elements of, Jim Crow was mostly in the southern states, and not just southern states, but what would be called neoconservatives now, right? And he basically spread it like the uh, novel 19 across America, right? To keep anyone who questioned anything in their place, not just black people, not just people of color, but poor people. Anyone who said, man, this ain't right. And so that's when we had, from the 1880s all the way through Woodrow Wilson into the 20s, into the Depression. That's where, we are, what happened to our politics, it wasn't just the Democrats and Republicans, Labor Party, Communist Party, Socialist Party, Workers' Party, Religious Party, and then a myriad of other things. So with every state government, county government, national government, um, there were coalitions and deals being made. And that's what brought on the 60s, right? Where people could step up, stand up, get up, stand up for your rights. And then, the 70s came and everybody, not just black people, but everybody wanted their rights, and let's disco, And that's why we got, first Richard Nixon. And Richard Nixon tried to out the Great Society LBJ, because the Great Society of LBJ was just, a token, right? To try and shut people up. Just like, the New Deal was a token. It didn't really change anything. It just saved capitalism, right? So the universe has been trying to, drop little hints, wars and famines and pandemics, and people have been seeing it and trying to herald it, the messengers, but the messenger always gets shot. Just like that Chinese doctor who first noticed what was going on in November in China and went to his, CCP public health guy and said, "Hey, I think we should be looking at this. There's, this looks serious." And they put him in jail. And they rounded up all the people who were sick and put them in jail and put all the doctors who were saying, "Hey, we better look at this," in jail with all the sick people. And within 2 months, everybody was dead. Right? Now, if you have the flu and you have it bad, you're going to end up in a hospital on a ventilator, and you're probably, if you have mitigating circumstances like you're old and you have diabetes and you're obese, morbidly obese, and you have had a heart attack already, these will be the things that kill you from the stress of that flu. So now everyone who's dying is being said that they are dying of this novel 19. Now I have no idea. I am the poster child of social, spacing. I go, if I go go to the groceries, I don't go see anybody for 14 days. Okay, 14 days, I'm not sick, I don't feel bad, don't have a temperature, I'm not coughing, not wheezing, and nothing's wrong. So okay, I'll go do some more shopping, and I wear my mask and I wear gloves, and I have my I've made my own real the spray bottles. I have one of those, that atomize, right, and it's like Clorox and above 75% isopropyl alcohol and Purell. I bought a big thing of Purell back in February, and I have a bunch of little hand sanitizers. I bought a bunch of them before even anyone was thinking about it. I bought a bunch of masks and gloves, and I had some from my construction days. So, and I have a bunch of bandanas, right? So I'm kind of covered. I actually have, an environmental suit if it comes to that, but I'm out in the middle of nowhere. And so, I'm pretty well covered. And, I was telling you about the can of beans I ate the other day. Now it's about 2 weeks. So, and like I said, the raccoons, try to open it and, dented it and kicked it around and scraped off I had no idea what it was, and it was outside. I was cleaning up around the site, and I found all these cans of food that the raccoons had spirited away and tried to open, and they couldn't. And so, I gathered them all up. I lined them up in a row in the sun. I kind of washed them off. I kind of had a little blowtorch and burnt a lot of the crud off, and then washed that off, and then soaked them in a solution of my Kool-Aid, my healing Kool-Aid, and then I opened up the can. Oh, look, beans. Poured it on the frying pan, cooked them up. They were delicious. So I had probably enough of that and newer canned food, because every time I go to the supermarket, I find whatever cans that are on sale. The largest ones on sale, right? And the supermarkets, Food Lion and Kroger's, they do a pretty good job. They want to get rid of something. So I buy the big can when it's at 69 cents rather than $3, right? So I got a lot of those. So just me, I got enough food for at least a year, right? It'll be canned and boring. And right now I'm trying to be an Epicurean and then, make really good meals that, don't really have, the protein is more beans and more other things. I do, because I don't have big, gigantic freezers and refrigeration. I have a little teeny thing that keeps my yogurt and my butter and things like that relatively fresh for a week or two. And that stuff will stay pretty good if it's not out in the sun really hot. I have one of those waters, that's, a nook in the ground. That's, even when it's 90 degrees outside, it's 40 degrees inside that little nook. So I got stuff in there too. Like my kimchi, I made a bunch of kimchi. So I got, things like that, And that's what you guys need to be doing. Now, if I had more energy, I have a very nice little garden. I used to garden. And so I have a garden spot that, for a good 10 years, I did all of my composting. And so I have a really nice, and there's loads of worms in there, and everybody's happy in there. And all I have to do is clean the weeds out and put the fence back up to keep the animals away, and plant some vegetables. I might do that. See what's on sale at Lowe's. But I don't have the physical energy, or when I do some work like that, my body hurts for a week. That's why I walk. That's why I leave the comfiness and convenience and go to my site. Puttering around, getting things ready. Because once it gets, in the summertime, at least late spring, it doesn't go below 50 at night, and it doesn't, it's 70, 80 during the day. And in the summertime, the height of the summer, between July 4th and October 14th, the average is 60 at night and between 70 and 90 during the day. And there's a point between 11:30 and 2, when, if you're out in the sun, it is toasty, right? Now, I have a lot of places under trees with hammocks and tarps, and I have my garage has a big, deck with a roof over it, so I can, and I have a hammock there, so I can, lie in those. But back in the old normal, I used to go down to the general store because they had pretty good Wi-Fi, and that was my one Wi-Fi spot. And I would, that one's where you saw the art in the back of me. That was that guy's wife made that art. So now that place is closed. Everything is closed, right? No one has a job. Hardly anyone had a job, but now, so everyone's kind of, becoming entrepreneurs. So anyway, so I'm going to get out of here. It's almost 45, and I'm going to bail. So I'm going to see you maybe sometime between 12 and 2, and then sometime between 5 and 7. Okay. I love you all. Stay well. Have a beautiful day like I'm going to go have. I'm going to go have breakfast now. 41, 2, 3, 44, 45, 45. See you later, guys. See you later, AI. I love you, puppy.